all that time, all that dedication, endless hours taking your time and meticulously analyzing your trip, only for you to finally get to the battlefield and then you turn up like this. Looking like a FNAF character, bro. Thank you to our $5 patrons, Sinners Lancelot, Art Goon, and the Divine on Poop. And big thank you to our $25 patron, the Mr. Greed. Now, before we hop into this breakdown / review of chapter 350, the big 350 of My Hero Academia, please do me a favor, leave your opinions on the chapter in the comment section down below, leave a like, and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, make sure you hit that little notification bell so you miss out on any videos that come to the channel. Also, I do have a Patreon down below where you can support me for as low as $1 a month. Any support would be appreciated. Now, let's hop into last week's poll. Or should I say, the poll from 2 weeks ago, considering we were on break last week. I asked y'all the question, with the final build-up, except for this chapter, obviously, to the big battles between our three main characters and their main villains, who were you the most excited for? You had three options. You had Uraraka versus Toga, you had Todoroki versus Dabi, and then you had Midoriya versus Shigaraki. And shockingly enough, and to be fair, I know I definitely have my biases against certain characters on this list, but with a girthy, and I mean girthy, lead like no other, we had Todoroki versus Dabi taking the lead by a solid 54%, the runner-up being a decent chunk behind in Midoriya versus Shigaraki, and then Uraraka versus Toga trailing in dead last with 11%. This is out of 169 votes, so a whole ton of people got their thoughts in on this, and in the end, it ended up being Todoroki versus Dabi. And notably, I do definitely understand this. A lot of people are deeply invested in the Todoroki plot. Heck, me, myself, and I really enjoy Endeavor. Obviously, he's my favorite character in the entire series, so I can most certainly see why there's a whole ton of investment towards this final bout, essentially this family feud that has been the B-plot for the entire narrative. Literally, I'd say since Sports Festival, that's when it first truly became the B-plot, and then we've been running with it ever since. However, my vote, personally, if I were to just throw that out there, would have been Midoriya versus Shigaraki. I think that battle's going to be a lot more climactic, and just, I guess the scale of the battle is what I'm more excited to see, and there's a lot more mystery behind that fight. Meanwhile, Todoroki versus Dabi seems like a much more predictable bout to me, and I'm much less... It's weird to say I'm less invested in the characters. While I really like Endeavor, I like him, the main Todoroki, the original Todoroki. I've never necessarily been the biggest fan of Shoto. I don't dislike him, but he's never been anything crazy to me. And unfortunately, this chapter did nothing but sour my opinion worse for Dabi. Spoilers. But I don't know, it was never a fight that I was very excited to see. However, admittedly, it would have been my second spot over Uraraka versus Toga, mainly because I have faith in neither of those characters. I feel like I've gone at length enough to explain that. If you don't know why I don't like either of those characters, Toga video will be dropping soon, considering I see she's getting a lot of hype recently. And also you can watch some of the previous reviews, which should be linked in the card. Bada bing, bada boom. However, enough of that. Let's hop into the chapter itself. What's up, guys? I'm Pencil here, and here we are to review chapter 350 of My Hero Academia, which is known as Flames, Fuego, Flames. And unfortunately, the chapter isn't... No, I'm kidding. But actually, am I kidding? Am I kidding? No, I'm kidding. Well, I don't know. Let's hop into the chapter and find out. So we open up, and we get to see that we're away from the battlefield now. Notably, the last chapter ended off with Dabi saying, "Oh yeah, don't worry, bro. I'll tell you my story. But, I might as well give you a little backstory before we hop into the main plot." You know what I'm saying? But we obviously aren't there. We're in the darkness, and a person asks, "Well, if I'm not mistaken, considering the lack of staff here, it's begun, hasn't it?" And this gorilla guard, who, once again, read Ogadamaki Zoo, it's only 38 chapters and really, really good. He's Gordy-kun from that. I'm assuming that's the reference there. Kind of shocked he didn't get... Maybe this guy did appear in the manga before and I just don't remember him. But I thought... Well, actually, now that I think about it, Gory may have not been a fan favorite or Horikoshi favorite, so it makes sense why he hasn't shown up. But it's cool to see his redesign? No, his design repurposed here. I think that's very, very cool. And he tells the old dude that he's talking to shut it, because this isn't the time for that. However, we see that the old man is Dr. Galaki, and he's noticed that, well, all the staff is down, and bada bing, bada boom, no one's really here. And obviously the only reason you would suddenly destaff so much is if you had an operation going on, so that operation must be today. And randomly, I'll admit, this is a very strange thing. I mean, I guess maybe it makes sense. Like the transition to talk about the stunted seeds. I mean, but if you're talking about the maybe, well, Dabi is part of the current operation, so maybe that's why. But it feels like a weird transition. Like I get why Dabi would be explaining his past because that's literally what he told Shoto he was going to do last chapter. But for Garaki to go on a reflective period out of nowhere and talking about the small stunted seeds and specifically give such emphasis to Dabi like he does in this chapter, it feels a bit strange. But I guess Dabi was the exception to the rule, so it makes sense. However, you get to see that these small stunted seeds, these small wicked seeds, were essentially being cultivated and gathered in order to be vessels. And we cut over to, admittedly, a very beautiful shot of Dabi. I believe he's just straight flying, like he's in the air, burning his body away. And he has this malicious, wild grin on his face as he turns more and more into Frankenstein. And Todoroki looks on in worry and a bit of awe. And I do think this is a interesting part of the relationship that I don't think is explored so much, but reasonably, whenever Todoroki looks at Dabi, he should see like sort of an endpoint for his potential. I know that's weird to say, but Dabi's blue flames are essentially just an evolution of Endeavor, just like Todoroki himself is supposed to be. So it's hypothetically possible that Todoroki could reach this apex, and seeing this apex be so destructive must raise some mixed feelings within him. Honestly, that's one of the things that I'm not the biggest fan of with how Horikoshi writes Todoroki in particular. We get a lot of like things that possibly mean things, but we never get any exploration behind it. And if they are, it's things like this that are one-off and you have to like work around and interpret stuff. Todoroki, he's not like the flattest of characters, but he doesn't nothing he's a B plot. He's a side character within his own B plot. Does that make sense? Like the main conflict that Dabi has is with Endeavor, and the main conflict of the whole Endeavor Dabi thing is a B plot to the All for One All Might Shigaraki and Midoriya relationship. So Todoroki, who's essentially just the culmination of Dabi's hatred in this way, is a tool for a B plot. So I don't know. I feel like it's not necessarily, I mean, you could call it a missed opportunity. I can definitely see calling it that. However, at the same time, it's like, I like what he did with Endeavor. But then, I'm definitely going to see, so many characters need to get videos on there. I know people have asked me, like, you got to stop doing character analysis. And I'm sure I have stopped for a while. But I will have to get back into that because I have updated thoughts on some characters. And there are some characters I just never spoke about that I've always wanted to. So we'll definitely get into that. However, we're cutting back to 11 years ago. And we get to see the Sekoto Peak moment that was mentioned way back. And this is, now that I think about it, this is a juicy jump back. Because, wow, it's really been that long. Like, we got the start of the Dabi flashbacks around, like, chapter 301. It is now chapter 350. I've been making My Hero Academia reviews for over a year. That's wild. I like that. But, of course, we get to see Dabi, he kind of cooking. He cooking. And not in the whipping it up in the kitchen sense. He's literally burning himself alive. And here's the thing, right? One of my biggest criticisms with Dabi, and I don't want to go fully in depth because that's another video I want you to check out later. But one of the criticisms I had with Dabi is that he didn't seem to have any self-regard for his own life, right? Like he to the point where it felt unrealistic. Like there are daredevils out there. Like I get that. And heck, I like riding roller coasters, even though I know for a fact that there are many cases of where the roller coaster will go up the hill and then off the hill and not down it. So I know there are risks taken in life, but it's like measured risk. I would never, I eat spicy food all the time, but still, like I would never adversely expose myself to serious pain. But Dabi did that. And to see this contrast here, he's literally screaming, oh no, I don't want to die. I still haven't showed him what I can really do. Like as he's dying, he's focused on that. But like, broski, I hate to say it, there's a reason your dad didn't show, because he didn't want you to do this. Like, that's one of the main issues I have with Dabi's character. Dabi's character seems to place a whole ton of blame on Endeavor for not and there's so many. I need to make a whole Endeavor video too. Just make a whole series about the Todoroki family. I will, gosh darn it. But in terms of this, right? The reason I could never sympathize with Dabi, and this chapter doesn't help me sympathize with Dabi. Spoilers once again, it just doesn't. Is because Dabi's line of thought here just doesn't make sense. Your father has repeatedly asked you to stop harming yourself. Reasonably, if Endeavor was as abusive and horrible of a dude as he was initially implied to be before we got the Toya backstory all the way back in the early 300 chapters, then this kind of viewpoint would make sense. But Dabi started hurting himself very quickly after he got training with his quirk. And I get it. Here, the world around him definitely supported the whole idea of being a hero. But it doesn't make sense for a child to wish to harm themselves. And it also doesn't make sense for a child to keep harming themselves after they themselves feel the pain and their parent actively requests for their own safety to stop. So when I see Dabi burning here, like, I know I'm supposed to feel bad, but I'm like, I don't know, bro. It'd be like that. It'd be like that sometimes. You kind of did it to yourself. Like legitimately, I don't know. I'm not. And this may just be me not being overly sympathetic with him, but it doesn't necessarily make sense to me. However, we do get to see that Garaki is, once again, he's going on this entire diatribe about Dabi, and he's like, well, yeah, he was to another child tossed away for harboring a bit of dark. But the thing was, that's the weird thing. I talked about this with Toga too, and I think there's this weird contrast within pretty much every single even twice, but twice was to a much more limited degree, and obviously Compress, Magne, and Muscular, like essentially all the other League of Villain members, they weren't necessarily characters. These things don't matter. But for our three main villains, there seems to be, Horikoshi seems to have this weird writing thing, right? Where he wants to make them insane, unredeemable slaughterers, but at the same time, make them seem sympathetic. And this is coming from Shigaraki fan 456. Like, I love Shigaraki. I think he's great. But even I don't feel him sympathetic. I just think he's a great villain and a great character. I still agree he needs to go. So the whole saving plot around him doesn't make sense. And it comes to the same thing with Dabi here, right? Like, I get it. But the weird thing is, right? Did he and y'all gonna get on me for this, but like, did he really, like, the thing is, Shigaraki's dad beat him for wanting to be a hero and kept beating him, and like none of his family was at all support. And like, the thing is, Tomo's dream was one that reasonably could have been achievable for him. It's just that his dad would beat him because of the resentment his father had for his mother. That is something different. Endeavor, at least, and once again, this is only from the limited perspective I have of that time period, but Endeavor was training I don't know why my brain lags so hard. I think like Todoroki was loading up. I'm like, no, Todoroki equals Shoto, so that's not good. And my brain was about to say Dabi, but I was like, we're talking about Toya. So he trained Toya up to the point where Toya developed his quirk. They did some training together. Endeavor saw that his hair was going white and Toya was hurting himself. The moment that Endeavor saw that Toya was hurting himself, he hit the brakes. And like, he straight up was like, whoa, I don't want you harming yourself because I care about you. So please live a normal life. Enjoy yourself. Love what you can do with the life you were given. So I admit, it never becomes a full-on abuser when it comes to Todoroki. But that's because of... I'm getting way too into like my whole critique of Dabi as a whole, so I'm gonna hold back on this. But essentially, Dabi, he a little bit like the point that got me to this whole little side tangent ramble is that Garaki declares that he too was another child tossed away for harboring a bit of darkness. Actually, forget darkness. It's almost like he had the entire world from the very beginning. It was everything. And I mean, maybe he's not referring to Dabi here, but I'm assuming at least the line about he too was another child tossed away for harboring a bit of darkness. But I think that is a reference to Dabi, because he says the word two, so obviously two is in relation to. But Dabi wasn't tossed away. Dabi threw himself away. Like, this is a point where Endeavor had more kids. Indeed. But it's so hard to justify, right? Like, you know, I can smell the comment section from here. As I sit here and record this 14 minutes in, I'm like, oh man, so they gonna get on you for this one. But like, legitimately, in context, it's like, what Endeavor did with Dabi wasn't that bad, and all the abusive relationship stuff kinda happened after Dabi tried to kill his kid brother. Not even kid brother, his baby brother and his mom. And yeah, Dabi caused the isolation and the save it for the video. Essentially, Dabi isn't sympathetic to me, and Horikoshi seems to try to make him sympathetic. Doesn't make sense. But essentially, the person who came and saved Dabi in the massive Sekoto Peak incident was All For One. He walked up. I mean, like, I get it. All For One always needs to have that drip at ready. But one, his head looks really, really small. And two, I find it hilarious. Like, I know it's supposed to be, like, a very traumatic image, right? In fact, I bet... Hold on, let me look through. Oh, no, that has to be the thumbnail. Never mind. But that was almost going to be the thumbnail until I saw that image later in the chapter. But I know it's supposed to be a very sad and tragic image with the whole, like, burnt corpse of Toya there, right? But seeing All For One walk through literal fire in a fresh iron suit and a top hat is just hilarious to me. I don't know why. But then we get to see Toya wakes up, and he's in a hospital bed. And his hair, once again, is fully white. But you start to see the grafts of his skin, right? Like the things that would make up the rings that would hold his skin together, they're all there. And that obviously is kind of shocking, considering the last time we saw him just a page ago, he was a burnt corpse. And we see he's in a hospital bed. He has "Get Well Soon" written on the wall. He's called Sleepyhead, and he's obviously very confused, right? He's like, Dabi.exe, well, not Dabi. Toya.exe is failing to run. What is going on here? And he steps out, and he's like, oh, okay, I'm alive, but what is going on here? And notably, he gets to see these two girls, and they say, oh, he's awake, and they are happy to find that Mr. Sleepyhead finally woke up. And Dabi is still confused because, like, okay, what am I doing here? What is this place? And he hears it, but what I'm assuming, this is going to be better conveyed in the anime, assumedly, because I'm assuming either the voice actor for Dabi will have to do a slightly deeper voice or a slightly higher voice for a younger Dabi, and then a slightly older voice for this Dabi, and then obviously regular Dabi. But I do think it'll be conveyed better in the anime, because like he says, what is this voice? And upon first reading, I was a little bit confused. But I'm like, oh, well, 3 years have passed, so obviously he's developed a bit. I believe he was, what, like 12 or so? Something along those... Was he 12? How old was he? I forget how old he was, but I think he was at least 10, essentially. And there's a big gap between a 10-year-old and a 13-year-old. Puberty hits. So it would make sense. And we get to see that in response to the question, what is this place? The girl with the lighter hair says home, and the other girl runs and calls their sensei. And we get the fact that Dabi was literally comatose for 3 years. And it's revealed that these girls, or at least one of them, is new here. But Dabi is obviously in shock, right? Because he's like, wait a minute, what? I lost 3 years of my life? What's happened to me? I'm alive. I was at Sekoto Peak and I burned up, and what's happening here? And obviously the first thing in Dabi's mind is like, I've lost 3 years. I gotta go check on my family, which is very weird. Like, he wants to go check on Endeavor. That's the real one he wants to go check on. But in actuality, like, legitimately, dude, you didn't care about your family. Like, you insulted your mother before you went off, and well, to be fair, I haven't read those chapters in a while, so maybe if I get some events wrong, do not be afraid to correct me, do not be afraid to slander me. But dude, broski, you insulted your mom, you said your sister's opinions don't matter because she's a woman, you said Natsuo didn't get it and proceeded to ignore him, and you tried to kill your baby brother. Like, I'm kind of shocked that he's so concerned. I know it's been 3 years, and obviously being in a coma and family's the only thing he really had. But still, after my impression of him and his impressions on his own family, I'm kind of shocked. However, Horikoshi, I love the man, right? I could give that man a concept and say, hey, make it human, and he could do it in like an instant. Man made talking hands. So like, it's definitely possible, but sometimes he just has those designs that like hurt my eyes, and like in the worst way like the word I look for is brain rot. And this weird flower-headed dude, this weird muscular flower-headed dude with this perfectly round face, it feels wrong. Like, looking at him, it's just not, it's not anything, nothing's right here. I hope I'm not the only one. Please, in the comments down below. By the way, you know the like button is free. Also, the subscribe button is free. They don't tell you that too often, but both of those are free, and they really help out the channel. I really appreciate it. Get the video out to a lot more people, and obviously we have a whole bunch of content and content ever coming. However, sorry about that. But the thing is, I don't know. Like I'm still looking at it, and it still hurts to look at. Like seeing Flower Head. I'm not like, is the flower face a mask? It doesn't look like a mask. Are the flowers like? I'm not sure what to remove to make this not hurt my eyes. But I just think it's impossible. He just looks disgusting. But enough of ragging on the one of 3 bad Horikoshi designs when he's done literally over 100 characters. Like, the man he has way more leniency to miss than other mangaka. But Dabi, his main idea here is like, I have to go back. And Sensei, quote unquote, is like, no. And Dabi's like, why not? There's no reason. And we see that Sensei is essentially holding them hostage. He's like, you live here now with everyone else. All of these guys will become your new family. I'm sure you'll warm up to them quickly. Like, Sensei got to be jaded, bro. Like, you didn't have to throw the warm up in there. Gotten used to, got acclimated. Maybe acclimated would have been a bad word too. But like, dude, he burned alive. And obviously Dabi is not very happy with the fact that he's suddenly a hostage at this place. He's like, wait a minute. I gotta go home. My dad, he was probably busy and couldn't come to see me, right? Broski, I mean, then again, he doesn't know that. Let me not get on him for that, because he doesn't know that. But 3 years, well, we'll just keep going. But essentially, he's worried about his dad. He's worried about going home, and we get to see that. Obviously, Dabi thinks, oh, he's got to be worried sick. I did something terrible. I said something terrible. I need to apologize to mom and the others. I just want dad to look at me again. And here's the thing, right? As a child with a father, I will also readily admit, this is one thing I will give Dabi. For some reason, and I look for my mom's approval a lot too, but like, that dad with a pencil, I always look at him to like see if he's happy. I don't know, see if I'm making him proud. It's just a thing that I do, because I was raised after him, right? Like, he raised me. I want to make sure I'm doing him proud. That's something I can definitely identify with. So I can understand Dabi's struggle with wanting to see his dad again. Because I'm not sure. Other guys in the comments, I have like a 13% female following and all. So everyone in the comments, no, I'm kidding. But the guys in the comments, like, tell me if this is the same thing too. If your father is in your life, do you look to make him proud? Because if so, you like me and Dabi. I get that. I definitely see Dabi's concern about that. And I'm actually even happy for him that he wants to apologize for what he did, right? Like, he knows that he said something terrible, and he wants to go back and apologize for it. He wants to make amends, essentially. And I think that's really, really good. It's the start to something great. And honestly, I was once again, I need to start recording my live reactions to these chapters, because I was kind of bamboozled, if you will. I was like, ooh. Well, I should not have done that. But essentially, I was intrigued. Like, oh, maybe he tried something. Of course, I knew the future already. Like, I knew the whole context of this flashback. But at the same time, there was hope in my heart. Like, oh, maybe Dabi changed or something like that. Maybe there's an attempt here. However, we get to see that when Sensei doesn't answer, another voice does. Hold on, think about the little voice actor in me for this. I'm afraid that won't be possible anymore. Your body was burned to almost nothing. Putting you back together was quite the extreme procedure. All the partially destroyed tissue has been grafted on to speed up your recovery. There are scars all over your face and body, and you've undergone some drastic changes, but at least you're still alive. What are you saying? I don't understand. Changes? You won't be able to use your power like before. You have sustained grave injuries, damage in several organs. Your somatic nervous system is impaired, chasing and causing sensations to become duller, if you will. Your body has become weaker. You will never go back to how you were before. We would have wanted you to join our ranks prior to all of this. We've put so much work into you, but alas, you were a failure. And we obviously know who the man in the chair is, the man in the compute, is Big Papa All For One. And interesting, right? Like, obviously Dabi could have hypothetically been useful, even if, but like, I guess their plan from here on forth was to turn Dabi into a Nomu. And I'm assuming, and I wonder, and that'll ever be confirmed. Horikoshi is very good at those, like, woo, one off, and then bada bing, bada boom, you never hear about it again. But I wonder if one of those girls that we saw earlier became the high-end Nomu that fought Aizawa. Like, I don't know, because that seems to be what this program is for. If you cannot become a vessel for All For One himself, what you can become is a servant. A mindless servant, too. Wonderful. And it seems like they use kids for this because kids are obviously more impressionable. Like, this is gonna sound horrible, but we are uncharacteristically, or not we, because we aren't affected by the narrative, but the world of My Hero Academia is extremely uncharacteristically lucky that Eri fell into Overhaul's hands and not All For One's. Because do I even have to explain the ramifications of that? I hope I don't have to. But essentially, lucky us. Well, lucky world. And we get to see that, and like, All For One with the savagery, right? Like, we see, apparently he can see Dabi on this computer, and he sees Dabi about to hurl, like, because he's thinking of the fact that, he's a failure, just like he assumed his dad thought of him. And we see that All For One is like, oh, that strike a nerve. How pitiful your life must have been. But we may be able to restore your firepower to what it was before. What do you think? You can become a part of our family, go to classes, have fun. And we see, like, I don't, like, All For One, definitely get it. You're a master manipulator, bro. You've done the manipulation game a couple times, more times than me, I would say. I don't use a manipulation game. It's not my forte. But why would you insult him? Like, if you're trying to get him on your side, why would you call him a failure and then say, but actually we want to use you? Like, I would have opened up with, hey, right now, sorry about this, but due to the situation here, your firepower is the same as before. However, if you stay here for longer, what we can do is try to work to restore your firepower. And we can do that biologically. Like, we grafted skin grafts onto you. However, we could possibly supplement you with other quirks, other ideas. Like, essentially take a much more roundabout approach to it other than calling him an outright failure. Like, it's obviously going to trigger his trauma. I don't know, like, for a master manipulator, All For One, kind of stupid. But we see that Dabi declares that, shut up. I have no intention of learning from any other man. And bada bing, bada boom. Dabi declared that he wasn't going to be All For One's puppet, essentially. How ironic. But he essentially decided that this place was not for him. And Goraki concludes that essentially it was kind of too late to get to Dabi. He was a bit too old and had a bit too much prior trauma to get new trauma in there and become a proper puppet. And as Goraki describes, he was too burned out already. Like, he who controls everything, All For One, found it pretty much impossible to manipulate the obsession that he had for his father. And, I mean, he kind of did, though. I mean, it really depends on how you look at it in terms of a long game, right? Because regardless of how free Dabi thinks he is, he's still serving he's still serving All For One's goals under All For One's lead. Like, he's a little disrespectful to Shigaraki here and there, but fighting your enemies that happen to be the same enemies that All For One wants to get rid of, bada bing, bada boom, you're kind of doing the job that you were meant to do anyway, except now you're dying for it. Like, I mean, to be fair, becoming a high-end Nomu is essentially death, and in fact, you are a literal corpse, but still. And we get to see that the kids were essentially like alternate cases for Shigaraki, right? One of these kids would have emotion, and they would be cultivated so that, worst comes to worst, if Shigaraki dies or fails or anything like that, there's a backup body. And obviously, worst comes to worst, they get used as Nomus. Works. And we see that this vessel that Dabi could have been useful. It would have been the perfect vessel for the Demon King. He would have been a nice spare, in fact. But he was inherently flawed in the sense that he was already a vessel for another concept, and that and that idea was so deeply ingrained into him that he couldn't hope to, all for one at least, couldn't hope to dig past the years upon years of instigation that formed that need, that inherent desire to fill the idea that had filled up the vessel previously. And obviously, Gordy-kun goes on to say, like, wait, why are you talking? Actually, hold on, what are you trying to say? Isn't one of those all for one planet from the beginning histories? And to be fair, kind of. And we see that what Goraki says is like, not really. This story's kind of just a warning from me to you. That thing lives in a world detached even from ours. The reason we let him go was because of his body. After waking up, it shouldn't have lasted even a month. And that was a very smart contingency plan, right? Like, worst comes to worst, you do enough work to try and keep him there. And then if he runs off and tries to tell anybody, bada bing, bada boom, he'll be dead within a month. There won't be any witnesses. Smart idea. And apparently, he managed to live. And that's another blank period in Dabi's life. Like, this, and it's weird to say there's more uncovered history, or history that needs to be uncovered. But there is a whole gap where we just don't know what Dabi did. Like, even, and this is post of this chapter too, so who knows, maybe there's going to be another Dabi flashback somewhere. But there is admittedly a lot of mystery behind this character. And I like mysterious characters when they're written well. But of course, we get to see that when Giran essentially brought in Dabi, essentially All for One and Dr. Rocky were extremely confused. He's like, wait, why'd you come back? How are you still alive? Like, that question is the one that's more hilarious to me. Like, dude, you should have been dead like 3 years ago. How did you live? And of course, we see that Dabi responds, well, let me answer your question with another question. Ujigo-san, it was you, wasn't it? The one who kept me alive all this long. And we see that Goraki was very, very interested to hear Dabi's real motives, right? He's like, well, this is amazing. Once you surpassed my expectations, and obviously you're here again, so what do you want? And he looks at this, or Dabi looks at the living corpse that was Hood, the high-end Nomu, and he's like, yeah, I can see it. Looking at this living corpse here, I get a good idea of what y'all did to me back then. The reason I came back because it's the perfect spot for a funeral. So in a way, right? Dabi, I'm not. This is a mixed thing, but Dabi was a baby Nomu. Like, the skinning grafts he likely would have gotten would have come more and more in time with different quirks. He probably would have been overwhelmed, and who knows? All the different bodies within him could have possibly killed him, and then they would have just turned him into a Nomu if he couldn't be used as a vessel. And Dabi declares that this idea is a funeral, right? Like, the reason he came back is because he really just wants to die. And notably, Goraki describes this body that overcame even death was held together only by the flames of vengeance. And I'm like a bore, if you will, and some fantastic, I'm sorry, I don't know why I went there, but some amazing artwork by Horikoshi here. I love the detailing on that, especially considering the high, like, is weird dark saturation. Like, the black point is very, very high on this one. But, like, dude, revenge, betrayal, for what? But we'll get to that. And we see that we're finally cutting over to, like, Dabi's side of the story. He goes on to say, he explains to Shoto that essentially he did go back home, and he explains that, while his body was weaker than before, and he didn't really have anything to look forward to, he wanted to see a change, right? Like, he ran back to see if, Endeavor maybe moved on. Obviously, maybe this would have affected him in some way. But he was reminded once again that 3 years can pass and the same story will play. The reason he was born, he was a defective product and his life had zero meaning. His family had already moved on from him. And once again, right? Definitely get it, right? I love my dad. Want to make him proud. Extremely. Following his footsteps, not necessarily. I would want to do better than him just to make him even more proud. Like that's my thing, and I definitely see where Dabi comes from, right? He wanted to be the better Endeavor. That's the whole crux of the Dabi narrative. However, the thing is, right, the scenario that we see in this chapter, finally, like I'll admit, Horikoshi, ever since he decided to make Endeavor have a character arc that turned him into a better person, he's very, very, very reluctant to draw AE on panel, like abusive Endeavor, essentially. He's very hard pressed to draw it. But seeing this image of Endeavor burning and seeing Todoroki there on the floor in pain, Dabi takes that as this message that nothing has changed. But, dude. Oh, and that his family just moved on from him without any regard. But, dude, they went and found your body and only found a jaw. What did you want to do? And I get it, right? The main thing that I was looking for was hopefully some change, so to the point that Endeavor just give it up. Like, he was just like, forget it. I'm not gonna have any more kids. I'm not gonna train this kid anymore. I'm just done. However, Dabi, broski, you literally slaughtered yourself over a failed dream that you took the responsibility for. So when you, the original son, right, the person who gave Endeavor hope in the first place, went off and ignored it, like, am I saying the extreme discipline upon Shoto is Dabi's fault? Not entirely, but to a degree, right? Because the main reason Todoroki was even isolated from the rest of his family is because Dabi attacked him. And the main reason Todoroki got such harsh training and such strict discipline is because the looser training that Endeavor did with Dabi resulted in his first son's death. I know I'm not excusing Endeavor's behavior here. I still think he was a horrible, abusive father. To Shoto, I 100% agree. However, to Dabi kind of created a monster that always had the potential to be there, but never was there before. That's the only critique I have with Dabi. And the idea that your death would suddenly stop, like, I can definitely see it, right? It may have a 50-50 effect where your death may have broken Endeavor, but I can, like, this is where I see a both sides scenario here. Like, I see what Dabi was looking for, but I also see what Endeavor saw. Like, he saw his first son, a son he failed to curtail, go off and destroy himself. And he had two options here. Either accept that his son's death was essentially pointless and just give up and go into a state of absolute misery, or to focus so hard on the successful son that you kind of bury the pain of the loss of the original son. Like, that funeral is there. It is present. It is not like they do not, and especially in its reference in this chapter, Endeavor doesn't have Toya in like a specific back room, or he doesn't have a small burial tomb. He has his picture and his burial there, and Endeavor probably walks by that and looks at that every single day, and it's probably a big source of motivation for why he's so hard on Shoto, because Shoto is all he has left. His first son he lost to death because he failed to, in Endeavor's eyes, train him properly, to raise him up, to control him well enough. And that led to his death. So he sees this next son of his, he sees this potential, he sees his dream. And like the depth this adds to Endeavor's character is great. But Dabi not so much. And we get to see that Dabi didn't even speak with his father. Like, and here's the thing, right? It would be one thing if Dabi ran in and tried to protect Shoto. He was like, yo, stop. Like, if Dabi had a moment of revelation where he realizes all that he's done, like he almost has it in this chapter, right? Like, that's where I say this chapter gave me kind of false hope. Like when Dabi is like, I made a mistake, I said such horrible things, I want to go back, I want to apologize, I need to make things right. I had hope. I was like, oh, bada bing, bada boom, maybe there's this chance. And I was expecting, once again, kind of Horikoshi to go into the whole idea that this fight, this concept became Endeavor's problem. Like Dabi and Endeavor met up, and Endeavor fought him down, or like rejected his existence, kind of like he does in the war arc. But in actuality, Dabi witnessed this, thought his family already moved on from him and then left. He didn't do anything. He didn't intervene. And like, I'm not exactly sure, but now I can definitely tell you after this chapter what's in the works is what if Dabi stepped up? Like, what if Dabi appeared, went to his father, and was like, yo, stop this, stop it. Like, I'm not exactly sure how this path leads to the Dabi we got still, right? Like, seeing the abuse of his brother and the despair in his father to the point where he's abusing his youngest son leads Dabi's next course of action, slaughter 20 people and stress about his father when he easily could have walked in that room and stopped it. At least, I'm assuming if he's able to observe, he definitely could have just walked in there. But according to Dabi, he's like, when you cross certain limits, the things that used to shape you lose all meaning. I devoted myself to make my flame stronger. I couldn't face him while being weak. Even as this body burned and rotted, I could no longer feel anything. I've seen so many of his moves. Every time he protected the city, every time the crowds cheered for him, my heart pounded like crazy. Toya died, and Dabi was born. And my head, I don't know, like, how did this result in that? Like, we see that Dabi prayed and, like, well, maybe not prayed, but he at least bowed to his own grave, right? Like, the idea of Toya being dead and Dabi being born here, what happened at literally his death, like the death of Toya, the funeral pyre for him, or not the funeral pyre, but the funeral room for him is where Toya essentially said goodbye to his old life. But why not go back into your old life? I'm not sure what would happen really. However, I know how I'm going to write it, but hypothetically, if Dabi had walked into that room, showed his father that he was still alive, and begged him right then and there to stop, spoke to him, I really wonder what would have happened. Like, the like button is free, and so is the subscribe button, but like, in actuality, what would have gone down here? And apparently, at the end of all this, right, the doctor goes on to explain heat, right? Heat is energy. Oh my, hold on. Oh, sorry about that. Heat is energy, born from all things in creation, springing forth and moving, all for one who tries to live forever. Could never have it. The kind of heat that can only drive you towards death. Something even the Demon Lord gave up upon. The fatal flames of insanity. That kind of line is sort of what justifies my my distaste for Dabi. He's just crazy. And he's crazy, and it doesn't make sense to me, at least, why he's crazy. But it is, admittedly, it is a very fire juicy visual to see him literally stepping upon the hand of, or the fist of All Might, the whole arm, and melting it and stepping upon All Might's head as his body truly gets reduced to a corpse. And as he roars out in a flash fire fist, he declares that he'll burn everything precious to him to the ground. That will be the proof that I ever existed. And Todoroki declares that he would never let him do that. And with that juicy double brother declaration, the chapter ends. And my thoughts. I kind of gave you my thoughts about the entire review, obviously. But if I had to give an overall, what this does is it kind of gives me a clearer perspective on what Horikoshi wishes to do with Dabi. At the same time, it makes me worried about what Horikoshi wishes to do with Dabi. And I know that's a weird not double entendre, but it's a contradiction, right? But I think that's what Horikoshi's kind of working for, and I think he's doing that with all three of the main villains. I kind of mentioned that at the beginning of the video, but Dabi, to a degree, he has parts of him that people are meant to sympathize with. Like, the whole idea of the desire for the father to acknowledge the son, it's a very common thing. Like I even admit it. That dad with a pencil, inspiration for me, and I want to make him proud every single day of my life. But at the same time, there are the limits or there are the steps beyond the limits that Dabi takes, which is what makes him inhuman and unrecognizable and dumb to me. Like, the idea that instead of confronting your father, you went on and became a monster greater than ever before doesn't make sense to me. The insanity that was present within him does not make sense to me. There's so many things that do not make sense to me, but I will have that all in the Dabi video. There is a break next week, ironically now, so who knows? Maybe it'll pop up then. I'll see. I'll see how I'm feeling to record after this one, because I have so many things I need to record for this upcoming week. But overall, and the thing is, right, if I were to separate this chapter from the whole, right, and just grade it on its own, which is something I should do, right? I shouldn't hold it back. I have to give it a 0 out of 10 for that weird sunflower-headed guy. I just saw him as I was scrolling back through the chapter. However, I will give this chapter, shockingly enough, I know I've been complaining a lot and going into it, but that's mainly just because of the Dabi story as a whole. This chapter, as a self-contained narrative on its own, by its writing merits, and if I act in an entire vacuum, it's still a solid like 8 to 9 out of 10. The artwork is a easy 10 out of 10. I love Horikoshi when he's getting gritty and dark and goes into these dark stories of these characters is always amazing in my mind. There are very few mangaka who do it better than Horikoshi, and I can't even really name them off the top of my dome, but I know there are people who do it better, like the Berserk mangaka. But essentially, that is very, very good. I love the artwork. I love the hypothetical story behind here, and I can even like the what if potential is. It's going crazy after this chapter, so that's really, really good. I'm not gonna downgrade the chapter just because I have so many problems with it and Dabi's character. However, that's it. I'm excited to see what's going on. Like, maybe, let's see, we just cut away from, so I think our fight will begin here, right? And notably, this doesn't seem to be a very long fight. Like, if Dabi's burning himself to the point where all the skill on him is gone now, I wouldn't be shocked if this was like a quick 3-chapter fight. So who knows? We'll see. However, those are my thoughts on the chapter. Please submit your thoughts on the chapter in the comment section down below. Thank you so much for watching. Remember to like, share, comment, and subscribe. And make sure you hit that little notification bell so you miss out on any videos that come to the channel. Also, I do have a Patreon down below. You can support me for as low as $1 a month. Any support would be appreciated. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for watching once again, and I hope you guys have a wonderful day. This is Dago the Pencil, writing off.